Hey everyone, this is Miss Moriarty and I'm here to discuss with us topic 8.3. In this topic, we're going to get into what are endocrine disruptors, and so for this topic, we're going to talk specifically about a couple different pollutants that fall into this category. So before we get into the specific examples of those pollutants, there are some vocab terms that we need to be familiar with when talking about pollutants and their impacts on both humans as well as vegetation and plants, animals within an ecosystem. So that first one being a neurotoxin, just as that part of the word neuro, right, refers to our nervous system, this is going to be a chemical that will disrupt our nervous system in some aspect, versus a carcinogen is one that's going to be a cancer-causing agent. A mutagen would be a type of carcinogen that can go in and actually damage our genetic material or damage our DNA and cause a mutation, hence the word mutagen. A teratogen is a chemical that usually interferes with the development of embryos or fetuses. An allergen would be one that would cause some sort of allergic reaction. And then F here, that would be an endocrine disruptor. So this would be a chemical that's going to interfere with the normal functioning of hormones. So it's going to disrupt our endocrine system in our bodies. Now, some ways in which these types of things can enter into the waterways can actually be through human medications, right? Oftentimes, human medications, especially ones that are meant to influence, say, human hormones, can be flushed down the toilet, and they can actually be a common source of an endocrine disruptor that can wind up harming or disrupting animals, then ecosystems. So getting into some common examples of endocrine disruptors, a lot of endocrine disruptors actually come from fertilizer use or pesticide use. So atrazine, for example, is a broad-spectrum type herbicide. So this is going to be used to kill any type of weed that may be preventing the growth of crops. This can be applied to agricultural fields. When it happens to rain, we could see runoff and carry the atrazine to then any local surface or groundwater, can contaminate human well water, and enter the body via unwashed produce. Another type of pesticide, specifically an insecticide that is actually no longer used, it is phased out, known as DDT. This was applied to agricultural fields, and just the same way as atrazine could wind up in our waterways, it could be carried through surface runoff, could wind up in surface waters, could wind up in groundwater, or could even be carried by wind. Now, another type of endocrine disruptor, not from a pesticide, but actually from plastics or cosmetic manufacturing, or phthalates. They can enter the surface and groundwater, usually through the dumping of trash or chemical waste. Could also come from the waste of landfill leaching. Usually is found in plastic food containers, especially ones, if you look on the bottom where you see the little recycle symbol. If it has a number 3, then it usually contains these types of compounds that are actually endocrine disruptors. Now, another common example of an endocrine disruptor is actually mercury. Remember, we did talk a little bit about mercury back in Unit 7. Mercury can come from the release of coal combustion, could even come from trash incineration, burning any type of medical waste, could even come from heating limestone to create cement. Now, the problem with mercury is that it can attach to any particulate matter that might be released from that burning, and it can deposit itself in soil as well as water. Could also be released in the form of coal ash, especially when we are mining for coal. Whenever it is going to be stored in a coal ash pond, that pond can overflow, we could see runoff, and that mercury can wind up in other waterways or even in groundwater. Our mercury is classified as an endocrine disruptor, so it has the ability to inhibit the production of estrogen as well as insulin. So it has the ability to interrupt the menstrual cycle of organisms as well as ovulation. It is also classified as a teratogen, so it can also play a role in the development of fetuses. And if it accumulates in a fetus's brain, it can then cause permanent damage to that then fetus. And so pregnant women should reduce their risk of being in contact with mercury by eating less and less seafood. And as you can see to the left, looking at the pie chart there, what is displayed is the amount of mercury emissions from different human activities. And we can see that that kind of varies around the world, but majority of Asia, right, Africa, South America tend to produce most of the mercury that we could potentially be exposed to. Now looking at lead. We previously spoke about lead back in Unit 7. Some sources of lead could be things like old paint, old pipes. Lead could also contaminate soils from particulate matter, from vehicle exhaust, could be released from what's called fly ash, so that's from coal combustion, specifically particulate matter. It latches onto the particulate matter. Our lead can be classified as a neurotoxicant, so it can interrupt our nervous systems, especially in children. It can cause permanent brain damage in children that have been found to have lead poisoning. It is also considered an endocrine disruptor, but if found to be in your water supply, you can purchase very expensive water filters in order to remove it, or even simply just replace the pipes. Another example of an endocrine disruptor is actually arsenic. Arsenic is naturally found in rock underground, and it can be released in groundwater, but can be worsened by local mining. Some anthropogenic sources, it's formerly in pesticides that can be spread onto an agricultural field and tends to kind of linger there, especially within the soil. Can also be found in some wood treatment chemicals to prevent any wood rot, as well as coal combustion and ash. Arsenic can be classified as a carcinogenic agent, so it can cause cancer to the lungs, bladder, kidneys. Can also be endocrine disrupting, specifically to the glucocorticoid system, which is the production of insulin and how your body breaks down glucose. And interestingly enough, some of the highest concentrations of arsenic that we find is actually in the upper Midwest and West area of the United States because of the type of bedrock that we tend to find there. But if you happen to find arsenic in your water supply, similar to lead, you can use very expensive water filters in order to remove it. Here's just a nice little table kind of outlining some of the common chemicals of major concern, what their classification type is, and what their effects may be. So don't forget, right, atrazine, DDT, phthalates, they are classified as endocrine disruptors. They have the potential to disrupt our endocrine systems as well as organisms' endocrine systems. Other things like our lead and mercury can also be endocrine disruptors as well, but can also be neurotoxins or carcinogenic. And for the practice FRQ for 8.3, if you want to take a moment and pause the video, answer the FRQ somewhere in your notes as well as in the Edpuzzle. Okay, at this point you should have paused the video. Here in our FRQ it stated, alligators in a Florida lake polluted by high levels of dioxins or chlorinated hydrocarbons had low testosterone levels and failed to reproduce. Identify the type of pollutant causing this issue and explain how it could have gotten into this lake ecosystem. Well, what we could have said is this type of pollutant would most likely be an endocrine disruptor because it indicated in the paragraph above that these alligators had low testosterone levels. Testosterone is a type of hormone that is going to be produced and disrupted in this case. It could have gotten into this lake ecosystem most likely by agricultural runoff or fertilizers containing dioxin. All right, everyone, that's our video on 8.3. Just make sure that you leave a question at the end.